All right, friends, welcome to the Blessed Family. I'm your host, Jared Dodd. So good to be back with you. And friends, today we are making Blessed Family radio show history, folks. We are doing a radio show that you can listen to on the radio, but we're also doing it with video cameras where you can watch this interview on our YouTube channel, Jared Dodd, or on our Facebook page. We're going to try and put as much of it up as we can. They won't let us put a whole hour up there, but maybe we'll put a preview, and that is Jared Dodd, Discipleship and Family Training. What is our topic today? It is the topic. It is the topic that you just can't get away from. That's right, the coronavirus that is changing the planet. And the question that we're going to be asking today is the virus changing the planet, or is it something else more dangerous? What is the real threat here? That's the question I've had, and I've wanted answers. And let me tell you what I do when I have questions that I need answers to. Well, first, I go to the Word of God, and I go to prayer. And then after that, I look for people who I believe God has gifted with answers. No one's going to get it perfect outside of God, but there's definitely people that have their head screwed on better than others. So who was I looking for? Well, first of all, I was looking for a Christian, someone who feared God, someone who had a biblical worldview, who knew history, who knew about God's kingdom, how it works. But I also needed a doctor. I needed a scientist. I knew someone, I needed to find someone who knew how to analyze data and come to reasonable and accurate conclusions. Most of all, or maybe not most of all, but in addition, I needed to find a friend who I could trust. Man, does such a person exist? Good news is I know quite a few people, at least enough to where there was a few men, but one in particular that fit the bill. Very good dear friend of mine. His name is Dr. Scott Hardin. He has been a doctor for 31 years now. He is board certified in physical medicine and rehabilitation. So don't worry, I just didn't find some guy that printed out some degree online. This guy is the real deal. He is the finder of Science Shepherd, a homeschool science curriculum that is extraordinary. He is married to a beautiful woman. He is the father of 6 wonderful children who all love God very much, and he even has a few grandchildren sprinkled in there. His daughter Katie joined my wife and I and our family in Guatemala back in 2015 for a month. It was a great time, and I have him with us today, and you're going to be able to hear from him. Dr. Scott Hardin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jared. Thanks very much. I'm really, really honored to be with you.
Hey, man, the honor is all mine. So I want to just jump right in here because you have just a plethora of knowledge and insight that I want our listeners to consider. And so the question I want to put on the table is, what exactly is COVID-19, aka the coronavirus? And kind of the question attached to that is, or the sentiment is, does it deserve this panic? I mean, I see people on all ends of the spectrum. Some people are just relaxed about it. Is that dangerous? Some people are going to extreme measures. Man, I'm getting all kinds of advice. I just heard from a nurse earlier this week that if we go to the grocery store, we're supposed to bring our canned goods home, spray them down, throw away the grocery store bags, put our clothes in the wash, and wash our hair, take a shower. So getting many, many mixed signals. Wondering if you would give us your perspective.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first, for your audience, I just want to mention 2 things. One is to let them know for sure. I realize I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not an infectious disease specialist, but that doesn't mean I don't have the ability to think logically and analyze data and come to conclusions. And that's what we do as physicians. A lot of people don't really realize that, but physicians are scientists, and some of us are bench scientists where we're doing research in the lab, but others are most of us, when we're practicing with patients, we have a lot of data we're intaking, the individual data about a patient that we're seeing, their coexisting medical conditions, what meds they're already on, what they're complaining about. Now they have a new problem. We take all of this data and we got to crunch it all together and figure out, okay, what am I going to do with this new problem with this person, or how do I optimally manage these old problems that things have changed. And so I just want to make sure people understand that every physician is really a trained scientist. It's simply how we end up applying that. But we're all trained to understand data, to understand that that data, it should drive what we do. And when there is no data, that we need to proceed in a very logical, thoughtful, rational fashion before we start deciding that we're going to be implementing certain treatments or certain actions, recommending actions for patients, because those actions have consequences. Hopefully, they're going to have good consequences, but sometimes they don't. And so that's really, there's a lot that goes on that people probably don't realize when they see their physician. There's a lot of analyzing, a lot of data that goes through their mind, and a very scientific approach about how to apply that. So I just want to make sure that people kind of get that. They're like, oh, this guy's not even a infectious disease doctor. No, I'm not. But that also means that I'm not skewed by the dogma that infectious disease doctors can be controlled by. And I feel like I'm an open book. Those of us who don't do infectious disease don't live in that world. I'm an open book, and we all have the ability to learn and to get smarter on something. And so, like me, like a lot of people, not just physicians, I've been reading a whole lot and listening a whole lot and trying to get smarter about this and take in the data. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that I'm not sitting here as an expert in infectious disease, but I am sitting here as an expert in how we do science, how we approach science, how to uh, how data should be collected, the complexities that go behind data collection and data development. What is good data? What's not good data? What should we do if we don't have good data? And things like that. And so that's really something that I've been spending a lot of time over my entire career doing, but particularly in this situation with this virus, because that I would say that's probably our underlying problem that we have. We don't have good data right now.
Wait a minute. Wait, Scott. Are you saying that what we're hearing from the news and the media is not accurate, perfect, good data 24/7?
I think the data is
That
accurate.
was a very sarcastic question, by the way.
No, understood. But I do think that it's a good question that people should be very cynical about the data we're getting. The data that we have, I think, is accurate within what we have. But that's where the whole situation comes in of what's behind the data. How is that trickling down to us? How are we collecting it? What does it look like? And that data collection looks very different across the world. It looks very different across the United States. And so what we're seeing is, a lot of the concern uh, that had been initially raised, and you asked initially, my question, the first question you had for me is, what is coronavirus? It's a cold virus. There's lots of different coronaviruses, and some of them infect human beings, some of them don't. Some of them start off infecting other animal species, and they mutate. That's one thing I wanted to point out for people, is that this is not evolution. I think we're all aware that if anybody knows me, you go to my website. Uh, Evolution is a farcical story, but you see that viruses evolve. They don't evolve, they mutate. And mutation and evolution are not the same thing. Even if evolution existed, they aren't the same thing. So that's the first thing to realize, is that sometimes the thing that allows a virus to infect a particular species, whether it's a pig or a dog or a horse, uh, and that same thing prevents them from infecting human beings. Sometimes those things mutate within the coronavirus is an RNA virus, so within the RNA that whole system kind of mutates, and then they're able to infect people. And that's where we think that this came from a different animal species and infected us. So there's lots and lots of coronaviruses, and most of them, they give you a cold if you respond at all. You get a runny nose, scratchy throat, maybe a little bronchitis. They're respiratory, they're upper respiratory tract, sometimes lower respiratory tract infectious agents. And there are other ones that exist as well that we are probably familiar with. Excuse me. For example, people may have heard of MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Virus. That's a type of coronavirus. They might be familiar with SARS. We had a number of years ago, we had the SARS scare, and that is also a that's also a type of coronavirus. So people get kind of freaked out when they hear this is a novel virus, like it never existed before. It has existed. It just has not infected humans, as far as we know. It's just not infected humans before.
Okay, so this is a simple cold, or it's in the family with the common cold. Um, how does it rank according to the data you've observed? How does it rank as far as danger compared to the flu, something that we're very familiar with?
It's nearly impossible to be able to tell that, and that brings us back to our data situation. Is that we do not have yet, we don't have appropriate data to be able to provide accurate understanding of how transmissible it is, of the of once somebody gets it, what's likely to happen to them. We know the overwhelming majority, 85% at least, of people that get this virus often don't even know they have it, or they have very minimal symptoms. We know a very small percentage, 2% or less right now, 2% or less, and that's of the number we know about. 2% or less die from it. And that's the thing to remember, is that when you have a situation where you're trying to calculate a mortality, that's something where you have a denominator, that is the number of people that die, and you have a numerator, and that's the number of people that get the infection. Right now, we know pretty much every single person in the world that's gotten this virus and died from it. Our numerator is very, very accurate, because we know every time somebody dies, they're being tested if they have any respiratory symptoms at all. And even if what kills them isn't related to the virus, they're still getting counted as a virus related death. How many people are there like that? I don't know. But even if there's one, it's not proper to say that that they died from the virus. So we have a great numerator, but we don't have a very good denominator. And the bigger the denominator gets, we have a very small denominator now. The bigger that gets, the bigger the denominator gets, the smaller the mortality gets, the smaller that percentage gets. And if I did a little bit of figuring, just based on some very simple data, and I'm just going to find it here. We've got, okay, so when we think about that, so uh, when right now, if about 85, again, the estimate is 85% of the people, could be more, that get the virus, really, they haven't been tested for it. We don't know they have it. They don't know they have it. I think that percentage is probably much higher, but let's say it's 85%. So if we kind of extrapolate out the numbers that we had earlier today for the coronavirus, right now we've listed about 750,000 people worldwide that are known to have the virus. But if really 85% of the people get it, they would never be tested because they don't know they have it. If that's right, then that number is actually closer to about 5 million people. And in the United States, we've got about a million-ish who have been counted as having it. Sorry, in the United States today, we have about 145,000 people that have been counted as having it. But if that, again, that 85% of that 85% number is accurate, of people who get it and don't know they have it, that really means in the United States we've got about a million people with it. So the bigger that total number gets of people infected, the lower the mortality gets. And that right now, that's what's driving all of this panic that we have throughout the world, is the computer models that we have. These are all, when we look at the modeling data, what we have are people, they do their best. I understand that. They make their best assumptions about what we know about the virus, and they put it into this computer model to try to figure out, well, what's the mortality rate? How many people can we expect are going to get it? How many people do we expect die? And if their numbers are wrong, if their assumptions are wrong, their model's going to be wrong. And we've already had this model out of the UK, the Imperial study that was done a couple of weeks ago, that had predicted millions of people were going to die in the United States. That same model that's come out, and the guy basically said, I looks like I was a little too negative in my modeling, but that's what we're basing this on. So to know how deadly it is, it's impossible to tell right now. And I think that's really where, the our leaders, our world medical leaders, our governmental leaders around the world, I think they've really been derelict in their duty in trying to provide the proper scope of this so we don't have this massive panic. And as you know, and I think probably most people do, every single year we have a pandemic. It's called the flu season, and it kills 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60,000 Americans just in America alone. And 35 to 50 million people get infected with that just in the United States. We don't do anything. We don't have people freaking out.
Yeah, just to back up a stat on that, was looking it up, and like you just said, many years it's 50,000 people, but back, I can't remember the exact year. I've got it here, but I don't want to take the time to pull it up. But maybe 2016, there were 80,000 people estimated that died of the flu. Just in 2017, I know there's a lot going on in New York, which I want you to tell us about later. But in 2017, over 4,500 people died just in New York of the flu. And so I just want to encourage our listeners. That's something, to put into perspective. We aren't at all. Dr. Hardin is not, and I am certainly not making little of life that has been lost. But what I'm hearing from Dr. Scott that I want to pass on to our listeners is we need to have a sense of proportion. Every year that we've lived, so I'm 40 years old, every year, tens of thousands of people die of a virus, just one, the flu, not to mention others, in this nation. And I think that's a really valuable point to make.
You're right, Jared. And I think the other thing that goes along with that is that we don't shut down our society for 3 or 4 months a year, every year, because of the flu. The flu is, for us, it's seasonal. We call it a seasonal thing, but the reality is it's winter somewhere, everywhere. And so it's a winter-based thing. So if we're not having the flu season here, it's the flu season somewhere else, wherever it's winter. It's for us, it's cyclical, but we take it in stride. And there are unfortunately, there are a lot of people that die from it every year, and those folks are the same people that the coronavirus is causing to die. And again, to reinforce, not making light of this. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal. Every human being that we lose is a big deal. But just the reality is, the whole fervor, the whole panic of this has been fueled by this seemingly very high mortality rate, which doesn't exist. And that I think that is a huge issue that we really need to kind of step back and consider. And then we know we're fairly able to accurately predict who is it going to actually kill. It's the elderly, it's the debilitated folks, the people that are chronically unhealthy and chronically have medical conditions that are at the highest risk for this, which doesn't mean, again, that we ignore them or anything, but we should have proper scope to this. So if you are a healthy 40-year-old guy, or me, a healthy 53-year-old guy, I am personally, for my health, I am not concerned about this virus at all, because I know the data shows that I have a 98% chance or better of having a cold, of being either asymptomatic or having some cold symptoms for a few days. That's not a big deal to me. So for the people that it is a big deal, is there a reasonable way to protect them right now? Honestly, I don't know. Is this going to do it? The complete destruction of our society and our economic system, and I'm not just talking about the United States, I'm talking worldwide. Is that the way to appropriately and properly address this? Maybe it is. I don't know, but I don't see the data driving us there right now. Otherwise, if it was driving us there, we should be doing this every single year because of the flu. Because the flu, again, by the numbers, looks a whole lot worse than what we're seeing with this.
Yeah, and just to make sure that it's that your point's clear, when you said as a 53-year-old healthy man, you have a 98% chance of being just fine with this. When you throw in the 85%, when you try to accurately get the denominator and the numerator for the mortalities, it would be you might have a 99.9% chance of being okay. Is that accurate?
Yeah, oh, for sure. It might be that high. It might be, this may end up being overall, with overall mortality, if we actually could ever get a fairly accurate denominator for that calculation, we might find that it is your 99. Again, if you're outside of of the at-risk population, you have a 99.9% chance. That's very possible of just having a cold like you get once or twice a year. Most people do anyway.
So then, moving from the data just to the opinion of Scott Hardin, based on the data, in your humble opinion, do you think that we as a people have overreacted to this virus?
Yes, yeah, I think we have. I think uh, the recommendations that we're following. I don't know about Texas, but we're basically confined to our homes. There are in Wisconsin, there are other states, also many other states, at least 27 or 28, I think the last time I looked, that are at this shelter at home. I don't even know what that means. Shelter at home. You basically stay at home orders. But now there are some states that are beginning to enforce that with at least the local law enforcement and sheriffs. And is that going to turn into a military, a military state of National Guard enforcing that? Is that a reasonable? Again, I don't know. I don't see the data driving us to a point where we need to be inhabited, where we need to be occupied by our own military to force us to stay in our homes for the next, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, five. I don't know what the magic number is.
Yeah, because once again, by your logic, if those are the means we need to take, then we should be doing that every year with the flu, which of course we can't because it would destroy it would just destroy our economy as we're seeing happening, and we're going to get into that a bit later. What about the advice we're getting? Like, for instance, the nurse that said, scrub down the bottles, throw away the grocery bags, wash your hair, clothes in the, I mean, I'm sure she had the best intentions, but as a medical professional, what would your advice be regarding that advice?
No, there's no justification for that. For again, for a normally healthy person, there's no justification for that because the data would suggest that a normally healthy person that gets this virus is not going to have anything happen to them. So if you are used to going out and shopping and doing your own thing, bringing stuff home, not washing the cans, not sterilizing them, not sterilizing your hands or taking a shower when you're done, I wouldn't. Why would you change that? You're again, for the data would indicate that for a healthy person, you are at no risk, no higher risk of being adversely affected by this than you are other upper respiratory viruses. So if you are somebody who's at risk, were you doing that before? Because there's other viruses that you can contract, including influenza, at any time. It's not, yes, it is. We have a peak during the winter, but people get influenza all year round. Are you doing that? Is that your recommendation for everybody going forward? So that's the thing that I'm saying is that this virus, if this was Ebola that actually does have appears a mortality rate of 50% or better, I mean actual genuine mortality of 50% or better, that would probably be really good advice. But for something that for healthy people is most likely going to give them a cold for a couple of days, why why would you be recommending something that you don't recommend otherwise? I mean, we never recommended that before to prevent getting common colds or whatever the case is. So that's all I'm saying is that the data that we have should not be driving us into this unrational, this irrational frenzy.
Yeah. So okay. So very, very, very good information. Uh, let's uh, let's go to. I think many people, as they listen to this or as they're watching this, they will agree with what you're saying in their area. Most people, for instance, you're in southeastern Wisconsin. I know I'd spoken to you at your hospital there. You've had maybe 20, 30 cases. Have you had any deaths yet with that?
Yes, we have. Yep.
Okay. Um,
Not
and
meant the exact number, but it's not a lot. I think certainly we're not seeing what New York City's seeing.
Yeah, and so in our area here in Texas, in our county, we've had a handful, maybe three, last I heard, confirmed cases. I haven't heard of anyone dying. So, but what about? I want to talk about New York, but first I want to talk about Italy because that's been the big scare, the big scary picture, and it's very, very interesting because we look at China, and unless they're lying to us, I mean, I haven't heard much from them. It seems like things are kind of getting back to normal there. In our area, it seems like things are kind of getting to normal, or maybe not to normal, but it seems kind of like the flu. But Italy, I'm hearing about hundreds of people dying every day. Could you give us maybe some stats on that and maybe some insight into that?
Sure, sure, and I think it's important for everybody to understand that a lot of the doomsday type models that we have were taken early from Italy, from the Italian experience here, and uh, what we are seeing. I'll give you the end of the story first, and that is that clearly whatever is going on in Italy is they are a far outlier in in mortality rate, and I'll get into the details of that. But what we see in Italy is uh, a reasonable way to try to standardize mortality rate. You can't look at number of deaths, just the raw number of deaths, because a bigger population, if you have more people and you have an infectious agent, you got more people to be able to get sick and unfortunately die. Or if you have a smaller population, you've got less people. So what we do is we try to standardize that so we can bring it down to a number that kind of crosses populations. And that number that we use is, mortality is usually number of deaths per 1,000 people or 100,000 people or million people of population. And what they're using for coronavirus right now is number of deaths per million people. So the idea is you kind of that's your way to standardize it based on the number of millions of people that you have in your country. You're able to standardize that. So when we look at that, I'm just looking at it right now on the Worldometer, and the deaths per million population in the United States is 8. So we have per million people, we've got what 300 million people. So we got 1 million people, and we have about eight deaths per million people. So we've had about 2,400-ish deaths or so. Uh, so that's 8. The rate in Italy right now is 192. It's like
Wow.
25 times higher than the United States. Spain is 157 deaths, so 20 times higher than the United States. The world average, by the way, is 8. The world average is 4.6. I'm not exactly sure how they calculated that because I was looking at the data a little bit more deeply and that doesn't make sense, but that's what they've got listed, so I'll go with that. So the world average is 4.6 deaths per 1 million people of
From the
population
coronavirus.
from the coronavirus. And so when you look at that, Italy, let's just make that go up to 5 because I can't do the other math in my head. Italy is 40 times higher than the world average. So that's a problem. That is a problem to base any model on whether you are a really, really awesome outlier in doing things or you're not an awesome outlier. You are an outlier. We should not be basing our predictive models as if we're going to have this horrible situation present. And I don't know why Italy is struggling so much. They are not doing well. Spain is not doing well. There are a number of countries that are really having a rough time managing their really sick patients. I saw an article that thought it was because Italy does have a very old population, so they have a higher percentage of people in the country that are at risk just by virtue of the fact that they're old. That might be. We know that older people have a harder time clearing the virus and die from it more often. That may be. Maybe there's some genetic predisposition. These are populations that haven't moved a lot. People in northern Italy tend to stay there, and maybe there's some sort of genetic predisposition to not being able to fight this virus off. The point is, we don't know. Why are they such an extreme outlier in bad outcomes? We don't know. And until we do know, we should not be using them as the model for how things are going to be managed around the world. Because, like I said, the average deaths per million population right now is about 50 times, 45 times lower than it is in Italy. You don't want to be that outlier.
Yeah, it's a
So,
big deal.
yeah,
Okay, well that
thinking we need to do.
yeah. Okay, so what about, and thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. What about New York? Can you tell us about what's going on in New York? Because as far as in America, what I hear is that's the area people are looking at and really panicking about and afraid that everyone's going to leave New York and travel and bring it here, and we're all going to get sick and die.
Yeah, yeah. The New York and New Jersey area is interesting uh, for sure. When you look at the cases right now, we've got 156,000 cases in the country right now, and 92,000 of them, so 70-ish%, are in New York and New Jersey,
Wow.
and that's a lot. So that's a lot. For the rest of the country, the next closest state, New Jersey's got 16,000 cases. Next closest state is California, the largest one in the country, has only 6,000 cases. So for sure, there is some issue relating when did the first case, when did the virus first enter the city, or the state. That does play a role in this, and I don't see when they estimated that. They used to have that up here, but I don't see that right now.
And do you see how many deaths New York has had so far with Corona? Do you have that data?
Yeah, total deaths is 1,218, and they don't provide the mortality rate. It's not that high. Let me just see what that comes out to be.
And as Scott's getting that number for us, I just want to remind our listeners, just for a sense of proportion, we aren't making light of deaths and sickness with coronavirus, but just for a sense of proportion, it's not uncommon for 4,000 to 5,000 people from the state of New York to die every year from the flu. So viruses, this is something we just need to understand. We are not accustomed to the word corona, but we're very accustomed to the word flu and virus, and we experience them every year, and they're hard and they can be rough and they can bring grief when we lose loved ones, but they're also something that we are we've always been very common. I mean, it's been very normal, and we go along with life. So just want to bring that point back up.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that, Jared. I think in medicine, even those of us who try really hard not to forget the humanity, we don't. The language that we use seems very cold, and I think really to some respect it necessarily has to be, because if you are affected by the death of every single person that you treat in a really personal negative way, you can't last long. And so we all deal with it in the best way that we can, but it does seem sometimes very impersonal. That is not the case at all. It's just you gotta survive this, man, and sometimes that's how you do it. So that death rate in New York and New Jersey calculates out, sorry, just in New York, calculates out to be about 1.8%. So
Okay.
it's still, there's been a large number of deaths, absolutely, from a number standpoint, but the percentage wise, it's not a very high percent. That means that 98.2% of the people that we know have had it have not died. They've they've become sick. How sick they were, I don't know, but just a very rough number. That's what we get.
So answer this question for me, Scott, because here's something I've been thinking. And once again, we all have our opinions, but many of our opinions aren't worth much because we have no idea what we're talking about. That's me, guilty. I'm not a medical professional. But something I've just been curious about is with the not the quarantining. I totally understand sick people being quarantined. I mean, that's something that we do respectively with the flu. Like if my kids are sick and we were planning on going to a gathering, we don't go and we explain and we say, oh, I have sick kids. And I say, oh, thank you. So quarantining is a good thing. But as far as shutting everything down the way we've been doing, at the way the government's been doing, what's been mysterious to me, and maybe you can shed light on this, is uh, we shut everything down. I mean, not everything, but we do what we're doing for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it cripples the economy and it cripples the world economy. Which economy isn't just about money. Economy is very much linked to life and the wellness and the quality of life. But then we finally say, okay, let's go back to normal. Well, coronavirus is still going to be here. You know what I mean? Like we aren't going to be able to eradicate the coronavirus. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the flu. The flu is always going to be here unless someone knows something that I don't. So why is the government taking the measures it is? What do I not know? What do I not understand? Is it that they're waiting for a cure or they're trying to, because I mean, let's say that we get the numbers really low and then we go back to normal. Well, they're just going to creep back up again because if someone has the corona, I mean, it's going to spread at some point, or maybe next year it'll come back. So help me figure out what I'm missing in that.
Well, I think you're not missing a lot. The idea is that by this whole the terminology they keep using is flattening the curve. That's the spike in the number of people that get infected at any one time. I want to make it to go from this to more like this, so it's flatter. So the idea is that you by having all of this uh, quarantining and reducing potentials for contact, that you reduce the spread of the disease through the community. It moves more slowly through the community so that you don't overpower your resources, that you don't have this, what they keep referring to as the surge of people coming to the emergency departments or getting really sick and getting admitted into the ICU, running out of ventilators, running out of ICU beds, running out of personal protective equipment, all of the stuff that we have seen in spots around the country, the concerns around that. I don't know that it's actually happened yet. Some of the reports on that are frankly a little bit hard to believe, but I think there have been certainly some limitations. A lot more goes into that that we can get into if you want, but I think that whole issue is what we're trying to do is uh, spread out the people so you're not passing it around so quickly, and then that allows when people do get sick, you've got more resources to be able to take care of them because it's more spread out. And the theory then is, yes, are we reducing the amount of spread and increasing the time? Right now they're all focused on a vaccination for this particular thing, so we reduce the spread of the virus and the number of sick people until we get a vaccine for it. And then you vaccinate everybody that hasn't had it, and you have this magical utopia where nobody's going to get sick from this coronavirus anymore. That's the idea of why they're doing this.
And do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's worth it?
I that's another thing that I honestly I don't know, because what we've been looking at right now is really just mortality. We've not been looking at the reality of this, of how many people are we really getting that really need to be admitted to the ICU in our country. I'm not talking about Italy or Spain or France or Iran, these countries that are really struggling with taking care of patients. I'm talking about the United States, where we have the greatest healthcare system in the world. We have the greatest nutritional levels in the world. We have a lot of not healthy people because they're too heavy, but otherwise we have generally a very healthy population. So is that the right thing to do? I honestly don't know, because what are we not taking into account, or what we are not taking into account yet, is the devastation that we are going to have, and we are already expecting, uh, we are already realizing of uh, of the economy. You mentioned that. We've already had 3.3 million people in 1 week file for unemployment. That was a record by like 5 times in the history of the United States, just 1 week. So we've had 3.5 million people lose their jobs. Well, what's their access going to be to healthcare now that they don't have their jobs anymore? How many of them are not going to be able to go see their doctors? We aren't having people see doctors right now. Most of the clinics in the United States uh, have shut down their elective visits. So, hey, doctor, I don't feel very well. Maybe I got heart failure or atrial fibrillation or whatever. I don't feel that great. Can I come in for an appointment? We go through a process to kind of figure out, is it, how emergent is it? How urgent is it? You don't need to come in. We try to do a video visit. Maybe that's going to work really well. Maybe it's not. We don't know. But there are all these unknowns that go along with what we're doing, that have that weave into the fabric of our society, not just now and in the next 3 months, but for probably for decades to come, that we don't understand what are the implications of, basically shutting the world down for 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, not only on the United States, but on, every other country is dependent on this one for their economic position. The US dollar is the world standard. The partnership, which sometimes is a little bit not a little bit tense between us and China, we are intricately linked with them. And how does this affect that? Nobody knows. Nobody's been able to model that or predict that. But we do know that the countries that, people are like, well, the economy's not that. No, it is that important. The countries with good economies have good health care. They have lower mortality. The countries with uh, poor economies have more people in that are in poverty, that have bad health care, that die from things that they shouldn't die from, that we haven't died from in this country for 100 years. So there's so much that goes into that question of, are we doing the right thing? I don't know, but my gut feeling is we're not. I think we went too far. The pendulum swung way too far based on the data that we had. It was all a fear-based protocol, and now you can't pull it back. It's impossible now to get the horse in the barn.
All right, so I got a couple questions for you. Let me do them one at a time, because there's two things I really want to address moving forward in this interview. One of them is just simply, people. I mean, and it makes sense. I mean, media is powerful. If someone tells me that if I leave my house or if I give someone a hug, I might die, that's going to affect the way I think, right? I mean, that's gonna make me. It's going to stir up fear. So I know you and your, beautiful wife Terry and the kids live there at the end of the cul-de-sac. Let's say I was a neighbor on one side, and pastor, our good old pastor Luke Dye, he's pastor on another side, or just a neighbor there, and we've got about 5 families there, and I want to throw a barbecue, and I give you a invitation. Would you come?
Uh, so that's a really good question, because we've got in my mind, two competing interests right now. We've got the scientific data that shows that even if we've got 10 people there that have coronavirus, and my whole family gets it, the worst thing, that they're all healthy, the worst thing that's going to happen to them is they get a cold and they feel kind of cruddy for a couple of days. I I'm I'm okay with that. I am okay with making that risk assessment myself and determining that, and then living and dealing with it so that if we do get sick and we have other events planned, we don't do them. So we're, if we're going to live by that logic, we're going to have to follow that logic throughout. And I'm not going to put anybody at risk because of my decision. So if we get sick at that barbecue, then we deal with we will appropriately manage the outcome of that. That's one for me, one side of it. The other side of it then gets us into uh, what is the ability of the government to limit our constitutional rights that we have established in this country. We are a country of laws. We have an agreement. The people of the United States have an agreement with each other and with the governmental leaders of what authority we are willing to live under in their rule. And so then that brings us in, and that's called the Constitution. And we have in that Constitution the freedom to assemble and to associate with who we want whenever we want. There's no limitation in there, and that's what we've agreed to. And then that swings us over into a Romans 13 discussion of the authority and how do you interpret and understand what an authority is, and biblically what the biblical authority is, and uh, how do you respond to that? Some people look at that as the authority is the authority and whatever they say goes. All right, that doesn't seem to be supported scripturally, since Paul and Stephen and a lot of the other apostles did not listen to the authorities in certain instances. I mean, it was very specifically certain instances. Some of them paid with their lives for that, not listening to the authorities. I think uh, uh, the authority issue was raised with Jesus. By what authority do you do these things? It's the same word that's used. Where do you get your power? Where do you get your authority? And so there's, I think, a very fun and complicated exegesis that goes into that understanding of that word that's used either for power or authority. The word, I love the word, it's exousia in Greek, but what does that mean to you? And I think that is something that you have to go through the exegesis and understand it yourself, and in your own conscience understand, what does that word mean to you? What does the Bible say? What's most consistent with the use of that word more than 100 times in the New Testament? What's most consistent with the meaning of that word? And then how does that apply to this situation? I think it gets really, really complicated when you look at it.
Well, yeah, and just to give our audience, which this is a passionate topic of mine, I think maybe we've spoken of it on previous shows. We just need to do a show about it sometime. Maybe I'll have Dr. Hardin back with us. But my personal conviction, and I believe this is also the conviction of Scott, is that our forefathers saw themselves as in contract, in covenant with leaders, basically saying, look, we are, especially in the context of this country, and even in our the first American War for independence, in our relationship as colonies with the king, it was an issue of, we are in covenant with you to serve you and for you to be our king, contingent upon you honoring the rights we have and the contracts we have. And so that's where many people, or well, not many, but some Christians think that our founding fathers broke Romans 13, whereas I would sharply disagree and say no, because Romans 13 is speaking of rebelling against lawful authorities, whereas what they were basically saying to the King of England is, you have taken away our rights. And I mean, they were doing a lot worse stuff than saying you have to stay at home. They were hiring Indians, the savages, to murder women and children. But they said, look, you are no longer a lawful authority under God and under the law. Therefore, we are independent of that. Now, I'm not saying, and I know Dr. Hardin isn't saying that's where our government is right now, but the point he's making, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, is that we are being put in an interesting situation that hopefully is very short lived. Because, for instance, this Sunday, I want to gather with the saints. And as we do each Sunday, and lawfully right now, not under God's law, but under man's law, we can't. But the problem with that is the order from man's law is contradicting the Constitution. That's the question on the table. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, yep, we're same lockstep here. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something that each of us are going to have to wrestle with and do according to what our conscience, the way our conscience leads us in our conviction as Christians. So I'm personally not going to give counsel either way. Just that we need to be obedient to Christ. And I would love to hear more about that. If you have more, share more. But for time's sake, I want to go on to the next question. And this is where we can have some fun, not that we haven't already. But, what we are seeing in this nation is unprecedented in the fact that never, correct me if I'm wrong, has there been a statewide and national-wide shutdown at various degrees. And something else I want to point out, just as an interesting side note, and our listeners can do their own research, but nearly every election year for the past dozen years, there's always been a virus. When you go back and look at the swine flu, N1H1, Ebola, some of the different scares, it's very, very fascinating to see when those happened. And yet, the question I have is, why is the nation responding this way? And something you said is, they're just responding out of fear, and they're making certain choices, and they can't get the horse in the barn. Like, it would be almost impossible for the president and the CDC and the Congress to come up and say, hey, you know what? We overreacted. Let's go back to normal tomorrow. We've got to wrestle with this issue now. My question is, getting into some fun, I told myself I wasn't going to use this phrase, but I'm going to, conspiracy theories, uh, to try to figure out why this might be happening. Is it more than just some people getting it wrong? I'm sure there's many innocent, well-intended people, which I personally would include the president in that. I personally think he's really trying to do his best. But who might benefit from this? And what agenda might this put forth? And once again, just to warm up this question for our guest, Saul Alinsky said in his book, Rules for Radicals, quote, never let a crisis go to waste, end quote. So any ideas, Scott, on whose agenda this might be a good opportunity to carry forward? And is there more than meets the eye with this issue?
I think there is. Now, I'm not going to go, full on conspiracy theory on this. Like, there's a guy, Peter Koenig or Koenig, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, but if people want to look up his article, he wrote a very long article on this. He's kind of all over conspiracy theories, and uh, I think with every conspiracy theory, there's some truth in there, some more so than others. And I am not right now of the mind that there is some group, the Bilderbergers or whoever they are back behind the scenes being the puppet masters. But I do think that there are people who benefit uh, in their agenda being advanced by encouraging or not in, by either encouraging the ongoing scare or not encouraging rational discourse throughout this whole thing, which I think we've severely lost. And so I think it's not a it's not a uh, it's not a worldwide panic that is orchestrated, but it is one that is uh, nobody is doing anything to try to uh, bring it under control and to make it reasonable. And I think the reason is one of the groups or the uh, group of groups that benefit from this. Uh, places like the Bill Gates Foundation, Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization, and the ID 2020, which is the worldwide attempt to give us all a digital identification. They're all banded together in this, in their effort to not only bring us under comprehensive and totalitarian vaccination status for every human on the planet, but to identify us perhaps by our vaccination status. And I don't really understand why would these groups be together. At least in the United States, our healthcare information is protected by law. By federal law protects our healthcare information. So why would an organization that's based in the United States and led by a US citizen be trying to push an agenda that would have our information digitized to to uh, basically make our immunization information, our personal health information, public, and that's how we are identified. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I certainly think that the present state of having great fear throughout this of the acts of omission of not leading the charge of, hey, we need to be rational about this. Let's look at the data that we have. Let's talk about the very severe outliers that Italy and Iran and Spain look to be. Let's talk about that. Why are we not going to panic because of that? What does the data show us? You're more likely, you are far more likely to be killed by the influenza virus or by getting hit by a car or falling in the bathtub than you are by the corona. You know, to set some rational foundation of 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 how this virus really affects us. Nobody's done that. And I think that they benefit from that, from their agenda of we want everybody to be immunized and we want to identify you based on your immunization. They benefit from that in the next year or two as the immunization comes out and they can say, hey, you remember what happened in 2020, don't you? We had this whole big problem. Remember, we had to shut down our society. We flushed our economy into the toilet for a decade. We don't want to do that again. Do you want to do that again? All you got to do is just get immunized and have this little ID chip put in you. Uh, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying they're not actively doing this, but this doesn't hurt their goal of doing just that, because that's what their goal is to make sure everybody gets immunized all the time, all over the world, and identifying us based in some way, it seems, related to our immunization status.
Okay, so could you tell us just a little more about that? Because I'm sure the vast majority of our listeners, like myself, are not, well, we're privy to the information, but we're not looking into it. Tell us about the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the Bill Gates Group, about this push to do vaccines mandated, correct me if I'm wrong, on every human being, and that those vaccines would play into what you're able to do in society. Can you just for a couple minutes really spell that out for us?
Sure. Well, the WHO, a lot of people don't realize this. I call them the WHO. It's the WHO, but the World Health Organization is a branch of the UN, and they they're all about immunization. They work very closely with Gavi. They work very closely with uh, the Bill Gates Foundation on this effort to have worldwide immunization. And they're convinced, maybe there's good motives, maybe there's not, but they seem to be legitimately convinced that immunizing everybody against everything is the right thing to do. And that's their goal, is to get everybody immunized. And so if that's the goal, how do you accomplish that goal? That's been a a difficult thing for them to do. In some of the totalitarian states, they're able to get people immunized very easily because the government just says you have to do it. We see countries around the world. I don't want to improperly identify any, but there are for sure a couple of the European Union countries. I want to say Germany, maybe the Netherlands. There's a couple of them. They're online. Like I said, I'm not sure which they are, but I know there are some that are now uh, fining the parents that refuse to get their children immunized. So they're moving down that pathway. We certainly have a very strong movement in the United States of really vilifying any parent that decides to perform an alternate immunization schedule or not have their child immunized. That is, there's very vitriolic uh, 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 approach to those folks in our social media and in our society. So we see this movement is picked up in a number of different ways, and I think they're getting a lot more clever and understanding about how do they proceed through this, how do they accomplish their goal, because their goal again is they want to leave no one behind with immunizations. At least that's Gavi's goal. And so how do they do that? They're getting there, but that, yes, that is their goal. Is I don't know that they care how they get there, but their goal is that everybody gets immunized.
So, and this is a tangent that I definitely didn't see coming, but I'm happy to go there real quick as we wrap up today's show. And this is controversial. This is more controversial than coronavirus, but in your medical uh, opinion, if you're able to go on record, if not, just like wink at me or something. Are the idea of forced immunization across the board for every human being, every child, taking away the parents' rights in that, from a law perspective, but also from a medical perspective, what are your views on that, real quick?
I think it's a difficult thing to do. I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means, uh, but I will modify that and buffer that with the idea that there are some vaccines that I think work very well, have good science behind them. Polio vaccine, smallpox, etc. I think there's very good data behind those vaccines working. There's other vaccines that we have that, in my opinion, are vaccines against a social disease. So things like the HPV vaccination, genital herpes. That's a social problem. You don't get genital herpes if you don't have sex until you get married, and your husband. That's a problem with for women because then it can cause cervical cancer. You don't have that if you follow kind of the way you do it in the Bible, what the Bible tells you. If you follow that plan in your life, you don't have that problem. That's more of a social issue. And so I don't think that, like, my daughters don't get that, and they won't get that. I mean, if they want to make the decision to get it when they're adults, that's fine. Well, actually, they're all adults now. None of them have had it. But anyway, I think that's a decision that you need to make as somebody that to understand that that's a social issue. There's other vaccines that seem to not work very well, and I've been vaccinated against hepatitis B twice because the first time it didn't work, and I didn't develop antibodies against it. And the second time, and I was forced to get, I didn't want it, but I got it because I was a physician and that's what we had to do. So then they tested me again some years later. I was not immune and I had to get it again. And you know what? It didn't work that time either. So I think that we should be suspect for some of these that have been shown to not be very effective. I'm not in, am I in a high risk environment as a physician? Maybe higher risk than you are in ministry, but if I'm careful and I follow the rules, I handle needles all the time, uh, and I'm not in the operating room, but I do procedures that require needles. If I do it the right way, I am not at risk for poking myself, and if I am, I'm the only one that is affected by by that. So there are some aspects of this. I think it gets very intricate in the particular things, the particular vaccinations, the diseases, how effective are the vaccinations, et cetera. I think there's a lot of particulars that go into it, but I am definitely not for forced vaccination 100% what the government says or the WHO or whoever it is across the board. Parents, your rights are gone in that respect. I'm not for that.
Oh, good to hear, Doctor. Well, just to kind of one of my last things that I want to throw in there is I am not a medical profession, not a medical professional, and I only know what I hear, and have to go off the information I'm told. And personally, for Jared Dodd, most of the sources I hear things from I don't trust. Here's a source that I do trust. And just to keep in mind, there is an agenda, and once again, I'm not saying that like Dr. Scott said, I agree with him. I don't think there's people behind the scenes making all of this stuff happen, but I think there's people that really want to benefit from it. And this is a principle of the left. The left understands. I mean, not the useful fools that just drive the machine along, but the people at the top. They understand that when people are afraid, they ask government to do more, not less. It's a quote from the Curtis Bowers Agenda documentary. That would be a great time to watch that, by the way. Agenda 1 and 2. But fear, look, what does the scripture say? It says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind, being able to think. So something I really want to encourage us is, regardless of what we think the truth is, in my understanding of scripture, fear is never an option. Concern, sure. Wisdom, absolutely. But when we walk in fear, we forfeit the ability to think rationally and logically and according to scripture. So we need to get rid of fear. There are people that want to benefit from your fear. So would encourage you to be sure you're getting your data from a good source, and want to thank Dr. Scott Hardin for coming on the show today. Scott, is there any last words, advice, or information you want to put out to our listeners?
Would just reinforce the last thing you said there, Jared. I think that God gave everybody a brain that has the ability to understand things, some at a, a, a more complex level than others, but I think everybody has the ability to read information and to become well informed, as informed as they need to be to make the right decisions for their family, so they're not driven by fear, and they can come to rational conclusions about how are we going to proceed as a family, or me as an individual if you don't have a family, based on knowledge, based on data, and not based on fear. Because I agree totally. Once you begin letting fear dictate what you do, what your decisions are, you're lost. You're lost to God, and God wants you to not be afraid of anything except Him.
Amen. Amen. Scott, thanks so much for coming on the show today, man. It's been a pleasure. Please tell Terry and the kids we said hey. Tell Mr. Bill congrats on finding a beautiful woman who loves God. They are rare, but they are out there.
Yes, they are. Thank you, and same to yours. Say hi to them for me.
You bet, buddy. You bet. Hey, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this or to watch this. Want to encourage you, you can check us out again on YouTube, Facebook. You can look on iTunes or on Spreaker.com. This is our family's calling to encourage you and assist you in God's truth, to be the people, the families, and ultimately the church that He wants us to be. Until next time, this is Jared Dodd signing off. Blessings to you. And praying that God would give us once again a spirit of peace, a peace that transcends all understanding. Amen.